Looks like I'm live. Although I'm still getting this little circle over here on the left.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, there we go. I think your thing's refreshing. Have comments on the left, maybe. Okay, I can see you.
Hello, everybody.
And I can hear you.
Paul Phillips coming to you on Facebook Live. And we're just starting here at 7 o'clock, and we're just going to wait for a little while as people log on. Thousands of people, as hundreds of thousands of people log on to listen to Pastor Paul Phillips. Carly is our production assistant.
Back here.
Hello, Carly. All right. And she's going to be looking at the comment section over here. So as I ask questions or you have questions, now is this little 21 up here? That's the number of people that are logged in, Carly?
Yes.
Okay, great. So you see the comment section. We'll be asking some questions, or if you just have questions that we're not answering, we will be happy to answer them. So, Carly, can you just write a comment in that comment section to make sure I can see it over there? All right.
There we go. I was gonna say.
Go, Carly. All
Thanks,
right.
Zach.
Hello, Luann Sackrider. Good to see you there on the comment section. Thank you. So that's helpful. Hey, as we get started, I just want to say some preliminary things, and I might circle back around to one or two of these. First of all, this might be the most important part right here. I'm going to show you a picture of my grandson. So that's pretty much the reason you want to tune in. Look at this. Oh, yeah. Pastor Paul getting ready at the pulpit, and grandson Daniel, 3 years old. And you know what I like about that? He's next to God's Word, and he's next to the communion table. So that's priceless. That is priceless. And that's what I want for my child. That's what I want for me. That's what I want for you. That's what I want for Noah Davis. Congratulations to Karen and Parker Davis for having a little girl named Noah just yesterday. So I want that for her. That's how we grow. That's how we change, is stay close to God's Word and to his body. So that's number one. Number two, actually a little more important than the picture, is we got these books in. Some of you have gotten them before. It's called Gentle and Lowly. We gave them away in the spring. And I think they were so popular that the publisher was giving some away to churches. So we actually ordered some maybe 8 weeks ago and just got them in, paperback books, and many of you got one, but if you didn't, we will have them here this Sunday for you at the information table. I think we got 200 of them. Mm-hmm. Is that right? So we got plenty of books, and we'd love for you to have one of those. All right. Here's something that is always interesting to me to know about people, especially if you're a podcaster. And I know podcasting has gotten pretty popular, and you can spend all your time listening to them. It's kind of like binging out on Netflix or something. You can binge out on a podcast. But I have probably maybe half a dozen podcasts that I listen to all the time. Most of the time they're church related, but I have a few that I listen to occasionally. So I'm going to give you the occasional listen Paul Phillips podcast list. And I want you to tell me if you have a podcast you like, because every once in a while I'm just looking for something that's a little bit offbeat. And I would say these are a little bit offbeat in some ways. Number one, there's a podcast called the Acton Line, Acton Line, Acton Line. Lord John Acton, he's the one who famously said, "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." Very famous quote. And it's mostly about civility. How do you live in a civilization in a civil way? And so I scroll through there and I pick out a topic or a person that sort of seems interesting to me. And so if I'm looking for civility and how to live in a culture, John Acton, Acton Line. Honestly, it's a new podcast by a former New York Times columnist named a woman named Barry, Bari Weiss, Weiss, Barry Weiss. Not a Christian podcast in any way, totally a cultural podcast. She and I would have some pretty strongly different views, but I just like, she's very clear. She's trying to be honest about the situation that she's discussing. She has some interesting guests. And so I scroll through there and listen to that. There's a pretty popular podcast that some of you would be aware of. It's called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. It's about Mark Driscoll and really about the broader evangelical community. And it's probably going to be like a Netflix show. It's going to have 10 episodes or something like that. It's not going to be ongoing. But a lot of people have talked about that. It's pretty interesting, sort of a biographical take of Mars Hill, the church in Seattle that Mark Driscoll is a part of. And it has kind of a larger commentary on the evangelical community in the last, let's say, 20, 25 years. So pretty interesting to listen to if you're into that sort of thing. On a totally different level, somebody introduced me to a podcast called Star Talk, STAR, Star Talk. And that's not Hollywood stars, that's the stars in the universe. And if you really just want to nerd out on black holes or quantum physics or Albert Einstein, and this is all way above my level, but the guy's pretty interesting to listen to. And I listened to one maybe a week ago. It was all about how do you know what the age of a star is? I mean, if a star is 2 billion years old and you're only going to live to 80, how do you know how old it is? And so, again, it's just totally nerd alert kind of stuff. If you like that, the Church Politics podcast, 2 African American men, Justin Giboney, and I don't remember the other guy's name. Totally different in terms of some of their political views from me, but genuine believers. They talk about politics from their viewpoint, and it was good for me to hear just some different takes. And sometimes I can kind of get in a hole or just get in a bubble, and some of these things take me out of my bubble. So anyway, I'm always sort of looking for ones, and if you have one, I'd love to hear what you have. All right, so last thing on sort of the miscellaneous line is I'm always encouraged by how many visitors we have at Christ Community Church really every week. And probably you've noticed as well, there's sort of 2 brackets that sort of dominate the visitor table right now. One is college students because they've just come back, so we're excited to have UNCW students back. And then either retirement or relocation. We have a lot of those folks. I was talking to a guy today who builds apartments, and I think he said 10 years ago, I can't remember the number he used, how many apartments we had, but now we have double that number. And he said it doesn't look like it's slowing down, and it doesn't look like it's slowing down to me. So always have visitors here, and we are a very welcoming church, so congratulations are well done on that. But just wanted to let you know to just be aware of that, because sometimes you can kind of walk into the sanctuary and sit down and talk to your spouse or your friend or the group that you came with or you're around, and there's somebody, a row or 2 away that they're not talking to anybody. And it'd be great if you just remembered, hey, I want to go up. I remember I was new one time, and I want to go up and say hello to them. We had a visitor from LA 2 weeks ago, and that is not the Leland area. It is Los Angeles. He was in town, vacationing in North Carolina, wanted to find a good church, found us online, and he wrote a nice letter back to Carly about how wonderful the church was. And he said, quote, "It was a wonderful slice of Southern hospitality." And so that made me wonder, I bet he doesn't get a lot of Southern hospitality in LA. So he was very happy to be with us, and that's the kind of notes we appreciate. All right, so here is some information that we want to try to cover tonight, and also we're recording this so we can have a link to it for everybody else. that is just helpful. We would have had this in a personal congregational meeting, but because of COVID, we couldn't do that. So the first thing I just want to mention is my sabbatical. I took the first half of my sabbatical this summer, and then I'm taking the second half next summer. And the main focus of this time was just to turn aside and be with the Lord. You remember when Moses was in the desert, he saw the burning bush, and it says he turned aside to see this great thing, a bush that was burning and is not consumed. And then it says, when the Lord saw that Moses turned aside, then he spoke. And so that's what I was trying to do, is turn aside, just get away from the burdens that I had been carrying and turn aside and just stare at the greatness of the Lord. And so that was accomplished, and thank you for allowing me to do that. I hope that you have time in your schedule to do it. Obviously, you don't have a sabbatical time, but I hope we're all doing it at some level, a little piece every day, a little piece every week. And so that was the main thing I did, just trying to turn aside. And you'll probably hear some of that time, or the consequence of some of that time, in the sermons, because especially as we get to Luke chapter 4, I'm really just talking about encountering Jesus. And really that's turning aside and allowing ourselves to look at Jesus and then be changed by him. So that's my sabbatical. Wonderful, wonderful first half. Looking forward to this year and looking forward to the second half of that next summer. Item number two, COVID. This is probably not my favorite item. There's two slogans that I've heard since I've gotten back just this past week. One is, Paul came back and so did COVID. I mean, come on. That's not very nice. Paul came back and so did COVID. Here was the other one after last week's sermon. Jesus is passing by and so is COVID. So I'm not trying to take that personally. And maybe you have a little funny phrase that you want to interject in the comment section. And if any of them are as funny as those two, we'll say them at the end. But COVID is passing by, and hopefully it's going to pass away at some point. All of you are aware of the situation with the New Hanover County mask mandate that goes into effect tomorrow at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I think, as far as I can tell from reading their website, it's just going to go back to where we were before. And so when I hear that, the first thing I want to do is just borrow David's words from Psalm 13. How long, O Lord? I just want to just lament. It feels like we're going backwards. And when I was thinking about this, it reminded me of a time when, now many years ago, and you'll realize this when I tell you this in a minute. Many years ago, I ran the Cooper River Bridge race down in Charleston, South Carolina. It's a 10K. That's 6.2 miles. That's probably not something Pastor Paul could do today. But back in the day, I did that. And you run across these beautiful bridges, and then you land sort of in the downtown Charleston area. And you come around this corner, and there's this really long street. And I assume this is the street of the finish line. And I'm looking ahead, and I see this big banner across the street. And, of course, I can't see at this point because I've been running for 5.5 miles or so. And I'm just thinking, this is the finish line. So I just get into my finish line run, which is pretty much what you would think, like, let's say, Olympics, stuff that you saw at the Olympics. I'm sprinting down the street in Charleston, and I get close to the sign and realize it's an advertisement. It's not the finish line. And words that came to my mind right at that moment are things that I probably don't want to say right now. Because I was exhausted. I got to this, what I thought was the finish line, and I realized as I looked ahead, the finish line was like, a quarter of a mile ahead. But I was already done, and this is what I feel like with COVID. I got to May, and I was like, yes, we finished the finish line, and we can take off our mask and celebrate, and now it feels like, no, your race isn't over. You got to keep running. So we are going to keep running. And so on this Sunday, Christ Community Church is returning to mask wearing on Sunday. Let's just all take a moment to say, Boo. We hate that. Everybody hates it. Nobody loves the mask. So I don't like it. The health team doesn't like it. Probably the people at the county don't like it. But nonetheless, we are now requesting, really like what we did back in May and the year before, that everyone who comes to Christ Community Church on a Sunday wear a mask. That's middle school all the way to adults. If you have a child, then we're just going to let the parents and the child decide that. If you burned your mask in your fire pit, let's say you did that, and you just don't want to wear a mask anymore, and you don't have a mask, well, we got some masks for you at church that you'll see as you enter the door. So don't worry about that. Look, I realize there's a variety of opinions on masks. I know politics plays a role, but at Christ Community Church, we're not trying to get into those arguments or fight or win or lose those battles. We're really just part of the community. Christ Community Church is an important church in the community. We want to try to get behind the things that we can in the community. So we're getting behind this to try to be helpful. I personally have run into quite a few more people who've had COVID in this go round than the first one. And I got a note from a doctor friend of mine today who was talking about the enormous stress on the hospital because of COVID. So we're going back to mask on Sunday. You know, again, if you read the website, it's kind of a 10-day thing, and then they're going to reevaluate. And if you're like me and you're a little bit skeptical, you think, it's a 10 days, so they can just lure you in for another 10 or another 20. But I think it's going to be until this Delta variant spike is over. And a lot of people have said that kind of comes in like a hurricane and is disruptive, and then it kind of leaves like a hurricane. So hopefully it'll be just maybe the month of September, the spike will go down and we can kind of go back to what we were hoping was going to be normal in October. But of course, we don't control any of that. We'll find out together how that works out. So wearing a mask, it's not exactly persecution. And if the government comes along and asks us to walk an extra mile, pretty sure Jesus said in Matthew 5, then go the extra mile. You remember the Romans would come up to the Jewish people and say, hey, you got to walk a mile. And then they would say, well, we'll walk too. So we're willing to walk too. That's part of being a believer and just saying, hey, because of who you are in your position and because we love our neighbor, we're willing to walk the extra mile. It doesn't need to be a big deal to wear a mask. It's not persecution, like I said. So we go back to mask, and hopefully it'll be another month, and we'll be back to normal. But again, we'll all see. We did really well on the whole mask thing last year. So personally, the staff and myself, we don't feel like it's going to be a big deal for Christ Community Church this time. I know people are more tired of it, but you guys did such a great job. I want to congratulate you for that. There were very few complaints. And I just want to say thanks in advance for your encouragement to us and the health team and your cooperation. Obviously, if you feel sick in any way, you should stay at home. I've known quite a few people who got the variant and they really never had symptoms because they had had the vaccination. But if you feel strange in any ways, please stay at home. And if you feel uncertain about being in a crowded area, it was pretty crowded here last Sunday. If that makes you nervous in any way, we totally understand and are continue to make the Facebook Live event at 9 o'clock on Sunday as good as we can make it. So you feel like you're still part of the church. So you may say, I'm going to take a Sunday or two to do that if you feel nervous about that. All right, number 3, Sunday school, and our adult Sunday school, which we call discipleship training, was supposed to start this Sunday, but obviously because of the variant and the mask and all that, we have pushed that off. We don't know when that's going to start. We hope it's going to start in October, but we hoped it would start this Sunday. So we're still sort of aiming for October. We're cautiously optimistic about that. As we go through September, certainly we'll let you know if that's going to happen. Beach Day is still on. That's this Sunday at 4 o'clock at Wrightsville Beach. And you need to park at Little Chapel on the boardwalk. If you want to park down there for free, if you want to pay, you can go to a lot of different parking lots. But if you want to park for free, Little chapel on the boardwalk, 4 o'clock. We're having pizza, Sandcastle building, the baptism. So it's a great time to be together, 4 o'clock on Sunday. And as also with all the other activities at Christ Community Church, most of them are continuing on, like women's Bible studies or community groups. But if you're involved with those, you just want to double back to your leader and make sure what you have on your calendar is going to take place. All right. Another topic: new paint and carpet inside CCC. Yay! Yay! In June, and we announced this some time ago, but you may have missed it. In June, the elders and deacons voted on and approved moving ahead, replacing all the carpet inside, upstairs and downstairs, and painting every wall inside, upstairs, and downstairs. So that is going to take place. We'll probably change out some furniture in the lobby. We'll most likely change out the sconces in the sanctuary. There'll probably be a couple other things that go along with this project. And the hope is, in talking to the folks that are going to actually do it, that can be done sometime this fall. So we'll still have church on Sunday during that time. Probably there'll be a Sunday or two that you'll come in and it'll be a little bit wonky because of carpet or paint, but we can get through that. That won't be the biggest thing that we've done, but Lord willing, this fall we'll have new carpet and new paint. So that's great. And what I want you to do is appreciate the people on this committee that are part of our paint and carpet committee. I mean, it's a difficult committee to be on. Let's be honest. You're choosing these colors for the next 10 to 15 years for 400 people, all of whom come to Christ Community Church and think of this as like my second home, which is what we want you to think. But then everybody who thinks about their home, they have an opinion on what their carpet or paint should look like. So we understand that. Right now we haven't put anybody in the witness protection program because they're on one of these committees, but do be praying for them and just unity as we go by. We know we can't meet everybody's needs, but we hope that will give sort of a fresh look to the inside of Christ Community Church. Next item I want to tell you something about is Trinity. Trinity Church is the church that was gifted to us last fall. And although it sort of took the transaction happened in the fall, there was an official document that had to go before the state and be okayed. And we thought that would take 30 to 60 days, but it's ended up taking 9 months. And just this past week, we got that okay from the Attorney General of the state of North Carolina. So Trinity is officially Christ Community Churches. So hip hip hooray on that. 4 acres over on Wilshire Boulevard, a beautiful church facility, a parking lot, beautiful land over there. And then they also had money in a checking account that they gave us. So it's been a tremendous gift. And it's been a tremendous gift to so many ministries because every single day that church is used for some kind of ministry. Some of it is from Christ Our Hope, who uses it on Sunday morning and has an office out of there. Kurt Solomon's a friend of mine. Some of it is for Christ Community Church events. Some of it are from other mentoring men and Christian Recovery House, and different college ministries use it. So it's really been a great gift to the church community, and we've just been grateful stewards of it. So we are excited about how that's going to continue to be used for God's purposes as we go into the future. One last thing, just wanted to say thank you all so much for your generosity. I know in uncertain and nervous times, it can cause you to sort of constrict and say, hey, I'm worried about the future. And sometimes that happens with your money. You just don't want it to flow out so freely. And Christ Community Church has done just an incredible job in their sacrifice and generosity. It's really been overwhelming. It honestly has been overwhelming. And I want to thank you for that. I mean, I know it comes through you from the Lord, but the Apostle Paul, at different points he sees churches who are willing to give, and then he sees other churches that he has to kind of spur on. And I want you to know, we haven't had to do that. You all have been the folks that have just been overwhelmingly generous not just with your money, but with your emotions, with your prayer, with your time, with your attention to different things that people have needs for. So last year in 2020, we had a record giving year of $1.1 million. And here we are 8 months into this year, and we are 35% over our year-to-date number last year. So it's really just we're blowing the top off of this, and that's just due to God's grace and your generosity. I want to say one thing about that. One, or a couple things about that. One is I feel like we have a great system of accountability at Christ Community Church. I was with another pastor during my sabbatical, and we happened to be talking about their system of accountability, and I was frightened for this guy because he really didn't have a good system. And we have taken every measure and all the best practices, and we can thank Louisa and Mark the Cosmaker for a lot of this, some of the deacons that serve on the finance committee. But we really do a good job of the accountability of the money that comes from the Lord through you. Secondly, I think we all feel like, and maybe just especially me, in the last couple of years, it feels like we've been, again, by God's giving, that we've been in sort of this asset accumulation phase. And it feels like, and again, I'm not a prophet. I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, but it feels like God's sort of lining something up. He's lining resources up so that Christ Community Church could enter into some kind of space in a significant way and use the resources, not just finances, but the building itself that we have at Trinity, the people that are coming to Christ Community Church. There's so many that come with certain skill sets, and a lot of people coming saying, hey, I want to get involved and I want to give. And so we feel like we have all these resources that are lining up, and we're just kind of waiting for God to open a door. And it may be that you have some idea about that, or you have some thought about that, and we'd love to hear your feedback on that as well. So there's probably other things I can say. I didn't want to take more than this amount of time to go through those pieces. Again, if you don't hear anything else, we are so grateful to be here together, and we want to try to stay together as much as we can, both unified and also physically together. We think that's an important part of being a church, and not just doing it by Facebook Live events. But in order to do that, we got to go back to the mask mandate until, or follow along these mask guidelines from the county until they back off, and hopefully that'll be a month. But we'll all be masked up, but underneath we'll be smiling this Sunday, and just glad that we can be together. All right, so I'm going to turn to Carly here and see if there's any particular questions that I need to try to answer before we sign off here.
None yet, but this is a few seconds behind, so we might need to give some time for questions.
Okay, so if you have a question or comment that you think we can try to answer here that would be helpful for this group, and also when we send this out to the larger congregation, we'd love to try to answer that before we sign off here. Again, we want to thank Carly for her production assistant. Probably give her a little bonus in her paycheck because don't forget to pick up the Gentle and Lowly book if you didn't get that, and don't just pick it up, read it. It's really been a I don't want to say life-changing, because that's way too big for the book, but there's just a sliver of how God operates that I hadn't thought too much about, or it hadn't lodged really in my mind. And he does a great job of the character of Christ. Jesus describes himself as gentle and lowly. And a lot of times I think of Jesus in a different kind of character trait, which might be correct, but I think I've missed out on this one, and so I want you to benefit from reading this book.
Two good questions that just came in. Ken Clausen asked, any guidance on social distances in sanctuary?
Great question about social distancing. We're not going to go back to the signs that we had before and the 2 people and taking out the rows. but we do think people will be sensitive to that, and we want you all to be sensitive to that. So if you're sitting down, we do want you to try to be respectful of the distance you might be between somebody. At this point, that hasn't been a big emphasis on the guidelines. It's been more about the mask. But I think we all need to be sensitive to coming in and saying, hey, let's make sure we have some space here between the people on this row. Of course, the college students all sit together, and that's okay. But just trying to sit together with your group, but not trying to over-regulate that piece.
And then Caleb Till said, if we have to continue under these COVID rules for longer than expected, is there any alternate plans for discipleship training?
There isn't. That's a great question, Caleb, and there isn't one right now because we really thought we were going to launch Sunday, and now we've, this governor's or the mayor or whoever, the city council came out with this mandate. So we didn't have a plan B, but I think if we get to, let's say, the middle of September and it looks like it's going to last with some significance longer, we will have a plan for that. And if you have any ideas about that, this would be a great time to share those with Joseph Ray, because he's the one who's sort of the tip of the spear. And if you've thought through an idea, or you've been in another church, you've seen a church do that well, he'd love to talk to you about that, because that might be something that we need to do.
Pam Hurt asked, what is the Iron Leadership Plan for the fall?
Great question, Pam. Iron Leadership Plan, and I'm assuming this question is really coming from Keith, but Mark, but it's Pam is the one who's writing. So Mark, the Iron Leadership Plan is, we are hoping to start the first week in October. That's our tentative sort of start date. And honestly, I would say that's maybe 60-40 yes. I hope it's 90-10, but I just get wary when the government comes in and says something. It always seems like it's a little longer, but our original goal was October the 1st. Our original goal was September, but then we got moved to October 1st. So we're shooting for October 1st, and hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks we'll feel good about that start date.
No other questions at this time.
Okay. Hey, everyone, thank you so much for your time and attention. Great to be with you tonight. I'll see you on Sunday, and I love you all. Let me pray together before we end. Lord, thank you so much for your kindness and your character, being gentle and lowly. And we need you at the lowest level for our souls to be well watered with your spirit, with your guidance, with your patience, with your mercy. And so would you do that through us and for the benefit of other people? Would you continue to bless us with your presence? That's the one thing we can't live without. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. I'll see you soon, everybody.